Imagine this. A young animal, maybe a camel calf or a fawn, suddenly seems stiff. It struggles to move, maybe can't even stand up, or worse, faces a sudden, unexplained death. What could be connecting these issues across different animals like camels and deer? Well, today we're doing a deep dive into something called white muscle disease. You might also hear it called nutritional muscular dystrophy or selenium responsive myopathy. Basically, it comes down to a nutritional imbalance, but the effects, they're way more dramatic, more widespread than you might think. We've gathered insights from some detailed research, veterinary reports, focusing specifically on camelids, that's camels, llamas, alpacas, and cervids, so deer and their relatives. Our mission here is to really unpack the science behind this disease, understand its impact, and see how one tiny nutrient plays such a massive role in survival. To get a solid understanding of what it is, why it happens, and how it's managed. We're turning complex medical stuff into clear, actionable knowledge. So let's kick things off. What exactly is white muscle disease? I mean, the name itself sounds a bit stark, doesn't it?
It really does. And that name, it actually comes from what the muscles look like after death. They get these pale, sort of white streaks. But the fascinating part, the root cause, is a deficiency in selenium. Often, it's combined with a lack of vitamin E, too. And these aren't just, minor vitamins. Selenium, for instance, is a crucial part of an enzyme called glutathione peroxidase. Think of it like cellular rust protection. It's essential for shielding cells, especially muscle cells, from oxidative damage.
Ah, okay, so cellular protection, rust protection, I like that analogy, that makes sense. But zooming out a bit, what are the big picture risk factors? Is this tied to specific places or environments?
Absolutely. A key thing to understand is that it's often about location, location, location. Animals living in areas where the soil is naturally low in selenium, well, they're at risk from the start because the plants they eat, their forage, won't have enough of it.
So the ground itself is deficient.
Exactly. Then you layer on physiological demands. Think about young, fast-growing animals or females that are pregnant or nursing their young. They just need more nutrients, so they become much more susceptible. In fact, you often see this most severely in young animals whose mothers were on deficient diets during pregnancy. It really shows that long-term impact of maternal nutrition.
Right, so it's passed on in a way. So what happens in the animal's body when this protection, this rust shield, fails?
Well, that's where things get serious. Without enough selenium and vitamin E, those cell membranes, particularly in muscle cells, they become really vulnerable to that oxidative stress, that rusting.
Oh.
This leads to muscle fibers actually starting to break down, degenerate, and die off. That's called necrosis.
Wow.
And crucially, this damage isn't just in the skeletal muscles, the ones for movement. It can also hit the heart muscle, the cardiac muscle, really hard.
That sounds incredibly serious, the heart muscle too.
Yeah.
Okay, let's maybe focus on the first group you mentioned, Camelidae, camels, llamas, alpacas. How does this deficiency actually show up in them?
Yeah, so nutritional myopathy, it has been documented in dromedary camels. It's caused some significant die-offs in certain herds. While maybe it's considered a bit unusual overall in camelids compared to, say, sheep, when outbreaks happen, they can be really severe, affecting both the young ones, the calves, and adults, too. And the link, when they've investigated these outbreaks, points directly to extremely low selenium levels in the soil and the plants they're eating.
Okay, so when it happens, it's bad.
Yeah.
What are the actual signs? What would someone like a vet or a farmer observe?
The signs can be quite variable, actually, sometimes subtle, sometimes really obvious. In calves, you might first see weakness. They seem reluctant to move. They walk with a very stiff gait, difficulty standing up, trouble nursing.
Okay, the basics are affected.
Right. But then it can escalate. You might see progressive opisthotonus. That's this really dramatic arching of the head, neck, and spine backwards. Or ataxia, which is poor coordination, stumbling. Eventually, they might not be able to stand at all. That's recumbency. And that often leads to respiratory distress, breathing problems, and sadly, death. Sounds awful.
And it's not just the muscles. Affected camel calves can also develop enteritis inflammation in the gut and pneumonia. And interestingly, something we see in the dams, the mothers, in these deficient herds are reproductive issues. Things like uterine prolapse or retained placentas after giving birth.
Wow, so it really is systemic. It goes way beyond just stiff legs. Given all those varied symptoms, how do vets actually diagnose this? Is it easy to mistake for something else?
Yeah, diagnosis usually starts with those clinical signs we just talked about,
Yeah.
plus getting a really good history of the animal's diet and where it lives. A post-mortem examination, unfortunately, is often very revealing. That's where you see those characteristic pale, white, streaky muscles, especially in the heart and the big skeletal muscles, like in the legs.
All right.
You'd run blood tests. You're looking for low levels of selenium and vitamin E in the serum. You'd also expect to see high levels of certain muscle enzymes like CK, creatine kinase, and AST, aspartate aminotransferase. These basically leak out of damaged muscle, so high levels are a big red flag.
Markers of muscle breakdown. Exactly. And specifically in camels, some studies found they might also have lower hemoglobin, lower packed cell volume signs of anemia, and even fewer platelets, plus signs of reduced antioxidant capacity overall. And it's definitely crucial to rule out other things, other myopathies, other muscle diseases.
Like what?
Well, there's atypical myopathy, which is caused by toxins, often from plants like the sycamore maple that's actually been reported in Bactrian camels, or something called capture myopathy. That's muscle damage triggered by extreme stress or exertion, like you might see in a wild animal after being chased or captured. Completely different cause, but some signs might overlap initially.
Got it. Okay, let's pivot then. Let's talk about cervidae. So deer, moose, elk. How does white muscle disease play out in these animals, especially, wild populations?
Right. White muscle disease is definitely a recognized issue in cervids. And again, it's a direct result of selenium deficiency in their environment. Just like other ruminants, deer get it when they're eating plants grown in those selenium-poor soils we discussed. And it doesn't just mess with their muscles, it significantly impacts their immune system too.
Okay, so similar root cause.
Yeah.
What about the signs in deer? Are they pretty much the same as in camelids, or are there differences, maybe because they're wild?
There are a lot of similarities, yes, but there are also some particularly, well, heartbreaking aspects you see more in deer. Fawns are the most commonly affected. You see that stiff gait again, an arched back, general weakness.
Poor little things.
Yeah, but what's really tough with deer is congenital WMD. That means fawns can be born dead, or they're so weak they die very shortly after birth because of the deficiency their mother had. They never really had a chance.
Oh, wow. That's devastating.
It is. And even if the deficiency isn't severe enough to cause those acute signs, you can get subclinical problems. Vets call it ill thrift.
Mm.
These are animals that just don't grow well, they seem underdeveloped, they fail to thrive. And like in camelids, selenium deficiency in deer is linked to reproductive failures, things like embryonic death, lower fertility rates. And as I mentioned, that weakened immunity makes them much more likely to get infections.
So this isn't just about a single sick deer then. You're saying this could actually impact whole wild populations.
Precisely. Think about it. A weak fawn with a stiff gait in the wild. It's much more vulnerable to predators.
Yeah, easy target.
Exactly. So this condition can lead to higher mortality rates, potentially causing local population declines. It acts as a really significant natural selective pressure. Diagnosis in deer follows a similar path. Clinical signs, then confirmation usually requires a necropsy to see those pale, damaged muscles. You can also test blood and tissue samples, like liver tissue, to confirm low selenium levels. And again, especially in wild settings, you need to be careful to distinguish it from capture myopathy.
Right, that stress-induced condition. So, okay, we've identified the problem in both groups.
Right.
What can actually be done? Is there a straightforward fix, treatment or prevention plan?
Well, the core approach for both treatment and prevention is pretty straightforward. Supplementation. You need to give them selenium and vitamin E. This can be done orally, mixed in feed perhaps, or often through injections. For example, some therapeutic doses used in camels involved injections of sodium selenite under the skin and vitamin E injected into the muscle.
Okay, supplementation makes sense.
Yeah.
But I seem to recall hearing that selenium,
Well, it's tricky. You can overdo it, right? There's a risk of toxicity.
that is an incredibly important point, yes.
Yeah.
How do you avoid toxicity? You have to be really careful. The margin between an effective, necessary dose of selenium and a toxic dose is actually quite narrow. It's a fine line. So it's absolutely critical not to accidentally double up. You shouldn't supplement from more than one source at the same time. Like, don't give injections and have a heavily fortified feed and a mineral block all at once without careful calculation. Overdosing is a real danger. Okay, good warning. So what about prevention then, especially in those known high-risk selenium-poor areas?
Prevention is definitely the best strategy, especially in those deficient regions. It really comes down to ensuring a balanced diet with enough selenium and vitamin E. This is extra important for those high-demand groups: pregnant and lactating females, and the young growing animals.
Makes sense.
For managed populations like farmed deer or llamas, regular blood tests can be really useful to monitor selenium levels, especially in those high-risk groups. In areas known to be deficient, providing mineral blocks that contain adequate levels of sodium selenite can be effective. Or, for farmed deer, you might add selenium to fortified grain mixes or offer free choice mineral or salt licks formulated with selenium.
So ways to get it into their diet consistently.
Exactly. And sometimes, depending on the situation, environmental management might play a role, like trying to improve pasture or provide access to forage known to be richer in selenium, but that's often harder to control, especially for wild animals.
Right. So if an animal does get diagnosed and treated, what's the general outlook? Is the prognosis good?
It depends. For milder cases, if you catch it early and start supplementation promptly, the prognosis is generally pretty good. They can recover well. However, for severe cases, especially if the heart muscle is significantly damaged, the prognosis is much more guarded or even poor. There's a real risk of sudden death from heart failure, even with treatment.
That cardiac involvement is key then.
It really is. And for wild populations, obviously, treating individual animals usually isn't practical. So in that context, the condition really does act as that strong, natural, selective pressure we talked about. Affected animals are just less likely to survive, less likely to pass on their genes.
It's quite sobering. We've seen how what seems like a tiny shortfall, just not enough selenium and vitamin E, can cascade into these really devastating problems. From muscle stiffness and trouble moving to reproductive failure, even sudden death. And it affects such different animals, from domestic llamas to wild elk. It just hammers home how critical these micronutrients are for basic cellular health, for life itself. And, understanding something like white muscle disease, it's more than just learning about an animal illness, isn't it? It's a really powerful reminder of how deeply interconnected everything is: nutrition, the environment they live in, their overall health. It highlights this incredibly intricate balance required for life, and how seemingly small things, like the mineral content of the soil, can have profound effects on whole species. So as you think about that delicate balance needed for these animals to thrive, maybe consider what this deep dive tells us more broadly. What about the implications for soil quality, for nutrient availability across entire ecosystems? What other hidden deficiencies might be out there, quietly impacting animal health, or maybe even human health in ways we just don't fully appreciate yet?